Hi everyone, and welcome to the Virtuzone Academy Q&A on starting your business. We're just waiting for everyone to join the webinar, so just give us a minute or two before we kick off. But before we dive into all the questions for today, I would like to introduce each of our panelists. We have Paul Bryson, who is Head of Domestic Structuring at Virtuzone. We have Sharon Tracy, who is the Company Information Manager, and we have Gary Thompson, who is Company Information Manager as well. My name is Christian Petersen, and I'm Head of Marketing, and I'll be moderating today's Q&A. Paul, do you want to start out by telling a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Hi, so as Christian says, my name is Paul Bryson. I'm Director of Structuring here at Virtuzone. I've been at Virtuzone for the last 3 years and been in the region for almost 10. And during that period of time, I've solely been focused on structuring and restructuring companies, helping international companies with their Gulf expansion and helping UAE-based companies export to other markets.
Thanks for that, Paul. Sharon?
Hi, guys. So my name's Sharon. I basically have been with Virtuzone for the last 4 years. I specialize in company formation in mostly all of the jurisdictions, but I mostly deal with free zones, and I would be happy to help you guys with whatever questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Gary?
Hi, good morning, all. My name's Gary Thompson. I'm a corporate formation specialist. I deal primarily with mainland, but I can help you in all jurisdictions across the UAE. I come from a legal background, and I quite enjoy dealing with companies coming from foreign jurisdictions and dealing with all the extra document requirements that are involved in that process.
Thanks a lot, Gary. I can see more and more people are joining the webinar, so let's just kick off. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for signing up and for joining the webinar today. We have received lots of great questions in advance that we will manage to go through, I'm confident, throughout the webinar. But if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to post them in the chatter that you will see on your screen, and we will be happy to answer them as well. Or at least we will do our best within this 1 hour that we have today. But I'm super excited to start off. This is the last Q&A Academy of the year. So thanks so much for joining. But yeah, let's start out with the questions we have received. Sharon, the first one is for you. It's Ben who would like to know if he has to have an office if he sets up a company in a free zone. Is that a requirement?
Majority of the free zones do not require you to have an office. They would allow you to either work from home and give you a facility for a flexi desk or a flexi office within there. But that's just for licensing purposes. You are able to just sit at home and work if you want, and most of them would allow that. Okay.
And he would also like to know, if he sets up in a Dubai free zone, is he allowed to trade with companies outside the UAE, let's say in the GCC, for example?
Yes, he can. There's no problem with that.
And the last question from Ben, does he have to charge his customers VAT if he deals with the clients in the UAE or outside the UAE?
Okay, so basically, first of all, to be eligible for VAT, there's an eligibility criteria. So there are two criteria. One is a mandatory registration and one is a voluntary one. So if you reach 180,000 dirhams as a turnover every year, you can voluntarily register for VAT. If you reach 367,000 turnover a year, you have to mandatorily register for it. Once you get your VAT number, if you are not going to reach those thresholds, you don't need to do it, okay? But once you reach those thresholds, any work that you do within the UAE, you would charge 5% VAT to. Any work that you do for clients outside of the UAE and the monies that are being paid to you are coming from outside and the work that you're doing for them is from the outside, you would charge VAT because you have a VAT number, but it would be at 0% in that case.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Sharon.
No worries.
Ben, I hope that answers your questions. Paul, the next one is for you. It's Anthony who would like to know what does it require to start a construction and surveying consultancy company in the UAE?
Okay, So he says the UAE, so that's quite broad. So commonly we look at when we get inquiries for this, it's usually Dubai or Abu Dhabi. Let's focus on Dubai for a moment. That's where we are. So if you want to set up anything related to construction in Dubai, firstly that'll have to go through Dubai municipality for approval. They regulate the construction sector. If you're coming from a foreign jurisdiction and you have a company already in existence which is involved in construction, then you will need to have several years experience in this. You cannot just rock up here and hope to set up a construction company. It is already quite a competitive space in the UAE, so it's pretty difficult to break into it. But if you are coming from a foreign jurisdiction, you need to have at least 15 years experience as a company. You need to have sound financials. You will need to have some completion certificates for the work that you've carried out in a specific sector. So we're saying consultancy here. Now, consultancy is quite broad. Again, if it's kind of design consultancy, then you will need to have completion certificates and proof that you've been able to do what you want to do here. So if you want to consult around, say, the building of bridges or dams, you will need to have experience in building bridges and dams in other places. You'll have completion certificates from clients. They'll be notarized and attested in the home country and translated to Arabic here. But it needs to be vast experience. You can't just have built one and then come here to set up. So it is quite tight, it is quite regulated, but that's where someone like us or another consultant would come in and help you navigate that and make it a lot easier to set up. So if you do have an inquiry about that, feel free to reach out separately, because we could talk about that for a while.
Thanks so much for that, Paul. And I can see there's more and more questions coming in as well in the chatter. We got a question here, if it's possible to submit questions along the way. Yes, if you have any questions that you haven't submitted to us in advance, just put them in the chatter and we will do our best to get through them throughout the next hour. Gary, Ami has a question. He is looking to start an online platform, a marketplace, quite similar to, it's an F&B marketplace platform that he wants to start. He's asking, what is the quickest and cheapest way to do so in whichever free zone? He is interested in the least regulation and red tape as possible because he want to get started as fast as possible.
Well, for this type of activity, the correct activity type would be what's called a portal. A portal is an application that connects buyers and sellers. A good example of a portal would be Talabat. Also, the Bizzle would be a portal. Ultimately, if you're not selling the goods directly, you're just connecting the buyer and the seller, then the portal is the facility that is used to connect and complete the transaction. So with Portal, you've actually got freedom to set up wherever you want. You can set up in any jurisdiction in the UAE, free zone or mainland. It depends on how many visas you will require, what your current plans are and what your future plans are. It also depends on where you want your office to be based. But if you just want something simple, straightforward, there's a very good option in Ras Al Khaimah. It's called the Ras Al Khaimah Business Package. You can set up a license and have a visa and a medical and an Emirates ID for only 13,700 dirhams. But that would only cater to you as an individual person. It wouldn't really have any future scope to grow. If you had plans to grow in the future, then you might want to look at another jurisdiction. But there's over 50 free zone options in the UAE, and there's also a jurisdiction for each of the Emirates in the mainland. So there's so much choice. We can have a discussion based on your individual requirements and advise you on the most suitable free zones depending on which criteria you want to meet.
Thanks, Gary. Ami also has another question which I think is pretty good. He's asking, what elements of creating a startup do you feel that most people are unaware of from a regulation standpoint? I'm sure it might not be the only one, thinking what are typically the regulations you wouldn't know about when setting up a business?
It really depends on the jurisdiction and the activity. For Portal, there isn't really any regulation. There isn't really anything to worry about because he's not selling the food directly. He isn't regulated. He's connecting a customer and a regulated business. If, for example, he was a restaurant, then he would be regulated in Dubai by Dubai municipality. So he would need to meet certain food hygiene standards. He would need to have commercial premises that is fitted out and approved by the Dubai Municipality Food Control Department. In the UAE, there is lots of different regulatory bodies and lots of different regulatory types, but it all depends on what you're wanting to do and where you want to do it. So I couldn't give you a one answer fits all, but if you give me a specific example, then I can tell you whether there's regulation or not. That's why companies like Virtuzone exist, to have these conversations and highlight all the things that you've maybe not thought about when you come up with your business plan.
Thanks, Gary. I saw there was a question in the chatter if this session is being recorded and published anywhere afterwards. So yeah, if you joined a little bit late or if you have to jump off a little bit early, we are recording the whole session. It is being posted on our YouTube channel subsequently. So if you're not following Virtuzone on YouTube at the moment, please go over and subscribe to our channel. Then you will be able to watch the webinar in full subsequently. Sharon, I would like to take a question from the audience. Someone asked what if we decided to establish a virtual company in a free zone and afterwards wanted to have a physical office space. Is that possible, and how would you go about it?
Yes, it's possible. Almost every free zone, if you start with a flexi desk, you can upgrade to an office. However, what you need to remember is that if you have a free zone license, legally you are only allowed to take offices within the free zone. For example, if I set you up in Dubai World Trade Center or DMCC with the flexi desk in the beginning, tomorrow when you want to take your office, you only have the right to take it within those free zones. So that's something they need to keep in mind. But yes, it's absolutely possible to upgrade and get an office at a later stage.
Okay.
Just in addition to what Sharon says, it is also possible to have an office in a business center. So even if you have a free zone company that's in DMCC, for example, and you want to have a mainland business center, you can operate from a business center somewhere else. But legally, to have your own presence and your own physical office, you can open a branch of company A in another jurisdiction. So for example, if you started in DMCC, you have a flexi desk there, but you want to have an office in Business Bay. Business Bay would be mainland. In most circumstances, you can open a branch of the free zone company in the mainland and then have your own physical office. So there's always lots of options. Even if there are restrictions, there's ways around those restrictions.
Okay. Sharon, we'll jump on to another question for you. It was submitted in advance from Kendra, who would like to know what's the license costs for a home tutoring business in Dubai.
Okay, so home tutoring basically in the UAE is not a completely legalized concept, okay, because there are certain activities in the UAE like real estate, education, food, and medical, which is very regulated because they affect a person's health, well-being, development, etc. So when it comes to education, ideally, any kind of teaching to a student or someone needs to be done either in a classroom or an academy, something that has a proper space where they're being taught, and of course the approvals from the required regulated departments like the KHDA or another department if it's in another free zone. Having said that, so if someone wants to come to my house and teach my child, technically that's not allowed, okay? But it's a bit of a gray area. Online education, there are a couple of free zones in the UAE that are allowing that as long as you are not meeting the person physically and as long as you're not providing any kind of qualification or certification. So if someone was just training me online for, let's say, my IELTS, or they were doing some kind of a language training online, things like that, there are a few free zones in Northern Emirates that would allow you to do that. And if you need more information on that, I can speak to you separately and give you more information on that as well.
Thank you, Sharon. So recently there's been some new announcements around the 100% ownership rule of mainland companies. And Paul, Jean-Marie and Paul would like to know, under these new rules, what's the what's the takeaways? What are really the things that have been announced by the governments around this topic? Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So that's the $1 million question. That's what we've been hearing about for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and even last year as well, when there were some announcements made regarding a negative list and a positive list of activities which could be under 100%. So what we'll say on it is, look, this is not something new to the UAE. I've been doing this for a while, and I've been hearing for a very long time that an expat can own an LLC 100% in the UAE. That will come eventually. So it's still not quite there. You've always been able to own mainland companies or DED licensed companies in the UAE 100% as an expat for many activities, particularly in the service sector. Let's say a restaurant, for example, you can own it 100% as an expat. You've always been able to do that. But what you don't get is you don't have an LLC, so you don't have limited liability. So what that means is your liability is unlimited. It's uncapped in your own personal capacity if you own that company. So it's a much safer option to go down the LLC route and put some local nominee shareholder in place to limit your liability and mitigate your risk. Now, the headlines that we're seeing and what you're reading is, if you read the cabinet resolution, is that right now, it's a great headline. It's very limited to certain activities. Right now, it's only 122 of some 3,500 activities whereby you can own the company 100% as an LLC. But with that, are there any drawbacks or limitations? Well, yes, there are. Firstly, there are minimum share capital requirements which do not exist with your traditional LLCs in the same way. The purpose of this, let's say the purpose of this movement is to attract foreign investment into the country, right? It's to stimulate the economy. So there are requirements for certain industries and certain sectors to have minimum share capital of at least 7.5 million dirhams paid up into local UAE bank account, and that goes up to 100 million dirhams for, let's say, a hospital. So right now it's very limited to certain activities. It doesn't apply to your generic consulting and trading companies, of which I would say in the high 90% of companies here are. Perhaps eventually we'll get there, but it's not just a sweeping blanket movement whereby tomorrow they're making a change. So it's very much staged and it's very much well thought out and strategized. But we'll get there eventually. People like Virtuzone, we have hundreds and hundreds of clients whereby we act as their local partner. If the laws change and it allows these companies to own their own businesses 100%, immediately we would transfer the 51% of the shares back to them. What you will find as well, and I think it's important to note, that you're always going to need a local service agent. Okay, even if you don't need a local shareholder or sponsor, you'll need a service agent, because someone locally must always be responsible for expats being here in the country. Someone has to have their name attached to them for labour and immigration purposes. So if you set up in a free zone, the free zone is your sponsor. If you set up around the company in the mainland, you're always going to need a local agent.
Thanks for that, Paul. Let's jump on to the next question. Gary, this is a question from Natalie. It's quite broad, but I'm sure a lot of people have had these thoughts. She's like, what is a free zone really, and what does it entail to set up a business in a free zone? How many are there in the UAE, and where are they located? I think before you mentioned that there's more than 50 now. But could you sort of tell us a little bit more about the concept of a free zone, and what's the benefits of setting up a business in a free zone?
Sure. So a free zone, if I can draw a parallel, a free zone is like a state in America. The UAE is one country, and the free zone is a geographical area within the country. So there are over 50 in the UAE. Within the geographical area, the free zones are governed by the federal law, which applies to mainland and applies to free zone. But they also then have their own rules and regulations, where certain parts of certain powers are devolved to them, so that they can make their own rules, regulations, pricing, procedures. So some laws apply to everyone, some laws apply only within a particular free zone. So the benefits of a free zone is that with all free zones, you can 100% own your company. Generally, they're cost effective to set up, and there can be tax benefits for import and export. However, at the moment, there is very little in terms of cost difference between mainland and free zone, because the pricing across the UAE for all setups has been disrupted because of COVID. So free zone is limited to you operating within that certain geographical area, as Sharon touched upon earlier. So if, for example, DMCC is the biggest free zone, and it's located in the JLT area of Dubai. If you have a company there, then you're allowed to provide services within JLT and out with the UAE. If you want to leave the geographical boundaries of the free zone and provide a physical service, you're not allowed to do that. You need to use a partner, or you need to use a distributor, or you need to use someone else to provide that service for you. You cannot do it directly from a free zone. And we can talk more about all the options. As I said, there's more than 50. Often they are categorized into subject types. So, for example, DMCC used to be for commodities, but it's now wider and wider. You have Media City, which is for media companies. You have Internet City, Academic City. You have all these different free zones for different category types. So depending on what you want to do, we can give you the best options, and then you can choose which free zone seems best for you.
Thanks for that, Gary. And I think, while we are on the topic of free zones and mainland, there's a question in the chatter from Gautam that would like to know that if he sets up a free zone company in Dubai, can he also open a Dubai mainland company in parallel?
Yeah, he can. In the UAE, you can open as many companies as you want. So you can have a free zone company, you can have a mainland company separately, or in certain circumstances, you can have a free zone company and then you can open a branch of it. A branch is the same legal entity. So you have an office in the free zone and you have an office on the mainland, but you only have one company legally. So yes, you can open up lots of different company types. You can also have holding structures. You can have, we can help you structure whatever way is best for your particular requirements.
Okay. Sharon, let's jump on to a question from Mark in the chat. It's quite interesting. So basically, Mark has a consultancy firm in India, but due to the high tax rate there, he's thinking of setting up an office in Dubai. And he would like just, to make sure that, he understands the rules correctly. So does he have to stay out of India for more than 6 months to get an NRI status? And since Dubai has no income tax and double tax treaties with India, no taxes should be paid in India. Is that correct? Maybe.
Yes, to an extent it is. So, like in the US, right? No matter where you stay in the world, if you're a US citizen, you have to pay taxes. India doesn't have that. If you live outside of India for more than 6 months in a year, you get NRI status, and the immigration reports shows that. Now, if you set up a company in Dubai, there are two types of for an NRI Indian, there are two types of tax exemptions that they can get. One is personal income tax and one is corporate tax. Okay, so for example, me being in the UAE and me living here, because I live here for more than 6 months, at the end of every year, I can get a tax residency certificate for myself saying that I live in the UAE for more than 180 days in a year. I submit that tax residency certificate to India, which means I pay no taxes to India for all the money that I send back home. The same thing you can get for a company as well. Once your company is registered in the UAE, after a year, you can apply for a tax residency certificate for the company. All the monies that are made in the UAE under that company then cannot be taxed in India. So this is how they would need to do. So I think there was a question wherein he mentioned what they would do is they would invoice from the Dubai company. They would invoice the Indian client from the Dubai company. The monies would come into the Dubai company in the UAE, and they can do the work for the Indian clients in India, no worries. And then they would not get taxed on it potentially.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much for that, Mark. I hope this answers your question. Paul, let's jump on to a question from Fortunato, who would like to know more about how to open a bank account in the UAE and also how to open an offshore company in the UAE, sort of how to go about that. Oh, I think we lost your voice, Paul. Oh. Yeah, you're back.
Thanks for the question. It really depends on which type of bank account you're talking about. So if you're referring to a standard retail bank account or a personal bank account, as we would know it, then you need to be a UAE resident with a UAE residence visa in order to avail things like debit cards, credit cards, loans here. So full functioning banking facilities. If you wish to open a corporate bank account, you need to have a trade license from either one of the free zone authorities or one of the mainland authorities, along with an office lease agreement or tenancy contract, and you'll need to have a visa under the company as well. At least one of the shareholders need to have a visa, not everyone, in order to get the corporate bank account open. So I think that kind of answers that question and ticks that box. Well, what we should say is there are some minimum capital or deposit requirements and maintaining balances for certain banks. These fluctuate regularly, so it's always best to just ask us at the time when you're ready to kind of move forward, and we'll recommend the most suitable banking option for you. We tend not to recommend specific banks. We'll say that these 3 or 4 are pretty good for your needs, but we wouldn't be responsible for recommending one particular bank to you. Now, in relation to setting up an offshore company, there are quite a few options here. There's probably kind of 8 to 10 different options inside this one country that are true offshore businesses, or IBCs, international business companies as we know them, like you would find in the British Virgin Islands or the Cayman Islands. So you are able to set them up here. They are not allowed to trade here in country. They can purely be used to hold assets or protect assets in this country, hold shares in other companies, but they can't invoice other countries, so they can't trade and do business in other countries. They cannot do it here. They don't allow you the ability to rent an office space here or apply for any residence visas. That's why perhaps if you might need that further down the line, you could perhaps open up a cheap and cheerful free zone option, a value option in one of the Northern Emirates, which could double up as an offshore holding entity and give you the ability to have visas and tax residency. But you cannot obtain that with purely an offshore company.
Thanks, Paul. I would also like to mention that if we don't manage to get around to all the questions today, feel free to send us an email at info@vc.ae, and we will definitely pick up the conversation directly with you. I'll post the email address in the chatter in just a minute. We're getting a lot of e-commerce related questions today, so thanks so much for submitting those. And I want to try and club them a little bit together for you, Gary. I'm just gonna read them out. The first one is in relation to selling products on places such as Amazon, Amazon UAE and Namshi UAE, like what license is required for that, as well as if you were to sell your products on international marketplaces like Etsy, for example, which is an American platform. Would there be any difference in the type of license you would need to sell in those marketplaces?
So generally, for these types of marketplaces, each have their own rules and requirements, but generally what they look for is that you have a trade license and that you have a tax registration number. Amazon in the UAE, for example, will allow you to import goods and keep all the goods in Amazon, and they will then be a distribution partner and deliver the goods to the end customer. I don't know how Etsy works. I'm not sure exactly how Namshi works, but they will all be the distributor model. So if you're bringing the product in and someone is distributing the product for you, like Amazon delivering it, then you can do this from a free zone company. But if you bring the goods into the UAE and then you deliver directly to the end customer yourself, then you have to do that from a mainland company because you're providing a sort of physical service. The last mile delivery is physically on the mainland and going to the end customer. So it really depends on what your business model is going to be. If you are 100% always going to stay online, then a free zone is suitable. But often these online platforms develop and grow and then want to open a shop or want to open a physical presence. If that's likely or possible, then there may be some advantage in starting with a mainland company, because a mainland company can do everything online and have a store, whereas a free zone company can only deal with online. Unless it's in a large free zone like DMCC, you cannot have a physical location.
And on sort of the topic of e-commerce, there's another question around setting up a company selling fashion and beauty products. Would you recommend setting up that company in a free zone or in mainland?
Ultimately, the same applies. You can do it from free zone or you can do it from mainland. Are you going to have a boutique later? Are you going to open a shop? If the answer to that is yes, then it might be better to start with the free zone. A trading company is one. Sorry, it might be better to start with mainland. A free zone company that does trading cannot open a branch. So if in the future you wanted to have a shop, you would have to open a separate company. So you should bear that in mind. But fashion, etc., can all be done online. If you're selling cosmetics, that's a little bit different because that needs to be registered with Dubai municipality. But you can also do that from the free zone and from mainland. So with e-commerce, you have flexibility. For physical store, you don't really have flexibility. It needs to be mainland in most circumstances.
All right, thanks, Gary. Sharon, the next one is from Mohammed, who would like to know if there's any specific requirements for accounting and bookkeeping service providers. If you were to set up a company like that, are there any rules and regulations that you need to follow or that you need to meet?
So it depends on where he wants to set up. If it's going to be a free zone or a mainland, both would allow him to do something that is just accounting and bookkeeping. It's not very, very regulated. At the max, they would need an attested degree certificate in the specific field, which shows that they are able to do this. They are not allowed to do auditing under this, only accounting and bookkeeping, because audited is a regulated license and it can only be mainland.
Okay. And another one from
can I jump in on the end of that? I think I can add. What you should do, definitely keep an eye on this positive list of LLC activities, which you can own 100%. We understand there will be some provision for accounting and bookkeeping companies, but we are yet to see what the capital requirements would be for that. But it is going to be an entity which can be owned 100% as an LLC for accounting and bookkeeping.
Okay. And Sharon, another question from Mohammed as well. What are the requirements for import and export businesses in terms of licensing? I imagine here he's like, okay, he would like to know what free zones would be recommended, or should he set up in mainland if he wants to run a business like that for import and export?
Right. So for import export, you need a trading license. So trading of garments, trading of building material, etc. Whether free zone or mainland depends on his business model. If he wants to sell in the mainland, for example, let's say he's bringing in clothes, he wants to set up a shop, or he wants to come and sell to me directly as a customer, has to be a mainland license. However, if he's doing import, export, re-export, so he brings the goods in from one country and then re-exports it to another country, that could be a free zone. With a free zone, he could potentially also sell in the mainland, but that is only to a distributor. So he sells his good to a mainland local distributor, and then that distributor funnels out the goods into the mainland to different people. Almost every jurisdiction, in my opinion, has activities for trading. Of course, the different types of trading activities differ. There's specific trading activities, and then there's general trading as well, which is more broad and encompasses more products. So he has, depending on his business model, he can set up in a free zone or a mainland again.
Okay. And you touched a little bit on import duties, and I saw there was a question in the chatter from someone who would like to know a little bit more about import duties in general. If you are importing products from outside the UAE to be sold in the UAE, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So import tax is 5% in the UAE. If you are going to be bringing goods in the UAE and you're going to be funneling it into the UAE, so the goods are coming to a port and then it's coming into the UAE and being sold here, the 5% tax would apply. However, if you are bringing the goods here to the port and directly from the port re-exporting it to another country, then there's no 5% tax. You pay a deposit at the port till the goods stay there. As soon as the goods go out to another country, you get the deposit back. So it's 5% if your goods are here and are being sold in here. If the goods are just coming here and then just being resold without entering the UAE, then no 0%, no 5% tax. I mean.
Okay. We're just about halfway through the webinar right now, so I just wanted to highlight a couple of promotions that we are currently running for all of you who are looking to start a business. If you go to our website, vc.ae, on the homepage, you will see two offers listed. The first, the VC starter package, where you for 19,995 dirhams a year can set up your business here in the UAE and get a free visa for life included. And that, by the way, that includes all the costs. It's all inclusive. We have another offer as well. If you want to set up, in particular, in the Dubai Free Zone in the Dubai Free Zone on board the QE2 in Port Rashid, we have an offer as well there, where you can set up a business for 16,995 dirhams. So the QE2 is a very unique location. You can say it's the only place, I think, in the world where you can set up a business on a ship and run it from there. It's absolutely beautiful, and if you haven't been there yet, I recommend you visit it. If you would like to know more about these two promotions, again, feel free to reach out to us on the email info@vc.ae, which I will post in the chatter now. But having said that, let's jump on to the next question for you, Gary. So Kamal would like to know, how can he start an engineering goods trading business in the UAE? Like, what is the registration process? And is there any way to get funding for that type of business as well?
Thanks, Kamal. It really depends on what the engineering goods are. Some of the goods will be regulated, some of them won't. For this type of company, it will almost certainly need to be a mainland company. You set up with the mainland, you still need a local partner. We can provide you with a corporate nominee who just holds shares on your behalf as a nominee only. We can take you through the business setup procedure. It will take 1 to 2 weeks maximum to set up the mainland company. And then the products themselves have to be registered. So if the products have been brought into the UAE before, they will already have their own import code. If the products haven't been brought into the UAE before, then they have to be registered for import. So what I would recommend for this is that we have a discussion over the particular products, and then we can advise on the appropriate activity and the appropriate steps. You'll notice that quite often is the answer to a lot of questions relating to mainland. You have to be quite specific about what you do, because if you enter with the wrong activity or you get the wrong advice at the beginning, it can end up costing you a lot of money later. So it's always wise to have quite an in-depth discussion about what exactly you plan to do now and in the future, so that what you start with covers you for as much as possible, for as little as possible. In terms of funding, there's lots of angel investors in the UAE, and there's also platforms now that you can pitch your idea to, and people will look at investing or not investing. You shouldn't rely on getting investment when you start your business. You should either have that in place or have enough funds in place to cover 6 months or a year of operating, and then look for investment. And in my experience, investors are more likely to invest in your business once it has a bit of a track record. So it's better to get up and running and then look for investment, unless you really have a killer idea that you know is going to be very, very enticing. It's better to actually have something that's worth value before you get an investor, because if you just have an idea, then you're going to be giving away quite a lot of equity in the business. If you've got something that's already making profit, then you can use that profit to get investment for a lesser share in your business.
Thanks, Gary. I saw Anthony is asking how he can set up a land surveying and construction consultancy company here in the UAE. Anthony, we actually already answered that question a little bit earlier on the webinar. Maybe you weren't on at that point, but we will share the recording of this webinar on YouTube afterwards. So please, I recommend you go and watch it there to get the answer to your question. Paul, I want to address the next question to you. It's around real estate, and it's from Babur, who's asking. He would like to ask if opening a trade license in the real estate, or opening a business within the real estate sector in Dubai, how safe is it to do a sponsorship with a local UAE citizen? The 51-59% sort of split in terms of ownership. Okay.
Right, it's quite a vague question, I think, but let me give you a little bit of insight, which could be relevant. You say a real estate business. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means a real estate development, a real estate brokerage company. Likely it's going to be one of the two, perhaps brokerage. If you're going to set up a real estate development business, you're going to need to have a lot of capital, a lot of experience from other countries in order to set that business up, and you should be developing something unique, not just coming here to build villas. Dubai municipality likely won't even approve the business because there's enough people here doing that. They want people that are going to add value to the emirate. So that's if you're doing that, and that can operate as a 51/49 with an individual local holding the shares, not a corporate entity. However, if you're looking at real estate brokerage, then right now an expat cannot hold shares in that business. It must be 100% owned by a UAE national, an individual person, which we can help with because we will put necessary documentation in place to protect your interests as the ultimate beneficial owner of that business, whereby we will pass the ownership control back to you from the individual local, and we'll manage that relationship between you and the local. It is very safe if done properly, but the question is valid because if it's not done properly, you could potentially lose a business, and that has happened to a very well-known British real estate brokerage firm here quite some time ago during the economic boom, whereby the UAE national knocked on the door and asked for the business back, having been purely a nominee shareholder. But you have to be careful. You have to make sure that you are covering yourself from any potential anti-fronting law that is in place in the country. But that's something, again, as Gary said, a lot of these mainland questions that you ask here are very, very vague. Often we are going to need much more information in order to make a proper recommendation. We have to assess the facts, make a proper recommendation to you. So usually for these, I would say, reach out to us personally. We'll always give you half an hour of our time on the phone to really understand and make a recommendation to you. But I think it's quite difficult to just make a kind of blanket assessment.
Thanks, Paul.
And if I can just add on to that, I actually have a question from Cherub. Cherub also asked, how do I set up a real estate company? I think that's very similar to essentially what Paul's just answered. But what I can tell you about touching on the 100% ownership announcement that's just came through is I was separately working on a project to try and find a way to set up a real estate brokerage or a real estate buying and selling brokerage without having a 100% local own the company. And we were quite far along in the project. However, we've got to a stage where it is now very, very clear that that's not going to be possible, and it's not going to be possible anytime in the near future. So the 100% ownership rule that's been announced categorically will not apply in the real estate sector. So you have to go with traditional model of a 100% owned company with a local, and the local needs to have the RERA qualifications, etc., that Paul referred to.
Thanks, Gary. And I saw Babu as well asked how much it will cost. So again, there's a lot of variables that goes into that final proposal that we would be submitting.
Christian, what I would say, I think it's important to know, you should have a realistic expectation for the price that you're going to pay for a UAE national to hold these shares on your behalf, because it is very much a premium product. It's not, can you please be my sponsor of a trading company? Each UAE national can only sponsor or hold the shares in one real estate brokerage company. So because of that, there is a premium associated with it, because there's a massive conflict of interest if they hold shares in more than one. So you can only hold one, so be prepared to pay an absolute premium through this. Don't be thinking that you can set it up on the cheap.
Thanks, Paul. Again, reach out to us at info@vc.a, and we're happy to take this conversation forward, because I think there's a lot of variables in it that we would need to cover. But I would like to jump back to another e-commerce question, but I think it's really good, and it's touching upon drop shipping, an e-commerce model that's getting a lot of grounds and only becoming more and more popular around the world. So Sharon, I would like that to address that question to you. It's one of our guests today who's asking, what are the rules of drop shipping? So I imagine meaning if you were to sell products via like a drop shipping model, or run a business via a drop shipping model, what are the requirements to set up such a business?
Okay, so first of all, you would need to have an e-commerce license, potentially because it's drop shipping and you are basically not dealing with it. You're not touching the physical product or dealing with the physical product. You could be a free zone based license. E-commerce, which allows you to then sell online. Drop shipping basically means, for example, I have a website. You go onto my website and you order a t-shirt. Okay. Now, when you order the t-shirt on my website, you pay on my website. Now the t-shirt either comes to me directly from the supplier, or I have either if I'm selling it through Amazon or if I have an Aramex or a DHL, these guys collect the product from the supplier, they store it in their warehouse if they need to store it, and they come and deliver it to the customer directly. Okay, so I don't have to deal with it as, even though it's my business, I don't deal with the physical product at all. All I deal with is just the website and the digital platform that I'm selling it on. Generally, in my experience, the clients who've been doing this, they have a logistics partner on board, Aramex, DHL, FedEx. You have so many of them. You also have local partners who may be slightly more cost effective. You just have a contract with them on a volume basis and tell them, we're getting these many things from, for example, China. They store it with them. They charge you for the storage. As and when you have orders coming through from your digital platform, it gets sent to them. They package it even the way that you want it. Suppose you want it tied with ribbon, done stuff. They package it, and then they go and deliver it to the customer directly. So that's how it would work, and it can be a free zone in that case.
And the same thing would, like, so let's say if you were to sell your products on Shopify, I guess another way of doing drop shipping where you don't work directly with suppliers, would that change anything in terms of the licensing requirements?
No, you can still be a free zone. As long as you are not dealing directly with the person, because even Shopify, if you're using Shopify as their website, you're not delivering the product yourself. Shopify is handling all of the delivery part, and they have a logistics partner who's going to be doing the actual physical handling of the product. So you can just be a free zone in that case.
Okay. Paul, are you still with us? Oh, there you were. There's a question here from Mohammed, which I think is good. He's asking, what are the most promising sectors right now to start a business in? So I guess this is quite broad, but let's say from your point of view, where are you seeing a lot of interest right now, and where you're seeing sort of our clients really excel in terms of the industry?
No, that's a fair question. It's not, typically what happens is a client will come and see us with a business idea or a product and service, and then we'll look at the best place for them to set up a business based on where the audience for that product or service is. In terms of promising sectors and what we've seen, particularly I would say during the last 9 months of this pandemic, is we've seen quite a lot of people from other countries set up online education businesses here. Across all the Emirates, not just one. That's one thing. And I think now we're seeing quite a big increase in portals. Any kind of online business that allows you to connect a buyer and a seller, they seem to be doing very well, not just here, but across the world. I mean, even just look at InstaShop, which was a UAE creation, an absolute startup, sold to Delivery Hero a couple of months ago for $350 million. What a great idea, what a very simple idea that's monetized in such a huge way. And then you just look at other places, Uber, Airbnb, Deliveroo, companies like that who started so small with nothing, purely marketing companies that will connect a buyer and a seller, some of the most valuable companies in the world these days. So I would say look at portals and how you can come up with some sort of good concept to connect someone with a product to someone that wants to purchase that product.
You've seen how many questions we've had today on e-commerce alone. That's everyone's turning to e-commerce just now because of COVID, and it's made millions for InstaShop.
It definitely has a great success story for the UAE. And Gary, I would like to address another question to you, because not only have we talked a lot about e-commerce today, we've also talked a lot about sort of the differences between free zones, between mainland, and so on. But here there's a question from Manoj, who is asking if he sets up a Dubai mainland company, can he then have a physical office space in a free zone, for example, in the MCC in Dubai?
If he has a mainland company, he can only have a physical office space within a free zone if the free zone building is dual licensed. So some free zone buildings can have mainland tenants and free zone tenants. Generally, this is in TCOM buildings. There's some, I believe, in Studio. Is it Media City, Paul? I think Paul knows this.
There's some dual purpose. Are you talking about the dual purpose buildings?
Yeah, the dual purpose buildings.
Within TCOM, there are quite a few that, one of the floors could be a mainland company, one of the floors used for mainland, one of the floors used for free zone. So if you own both a free zone and a mainland company, they're quite good options for you to keep your businesses close.
Yeah, so that's the only legal way to do it from a mainland company. You can also open a branch of a mainland company inside a free zone. So you could open a DMCC branch of your free zone company and then have an office in DMCC. There's a dual licensing option that's now available as well that lets you, for very, very limited number of activities, have a DMCC license and a DMCC office, but operate on the mainland. It's mainly for consulting activities, but you don't need an office. But it's not possible at the moment to do it the other way around. It's not possible to have a mainland license and a DMCC office unless the particular building is dual licensed.
Okay, thanks for that. Sharon, we've gotten a question here around freelancer licenses. So I think something that's been extremely popular, at least for the last couple of years, and in particular during COVID, where people have been looking for side hustles to earn a little bit of money on the side of their full-time job, or in the case if they have lost their jobs. So one of our participants today is asking if we sort of can explain a little bit more about the freelancer licenses. How do they work? Where can you get them from? Does it only cover services, or can you also sell products within the UAE? And can you have a license even if you're not a GCC citizen? Yeah.
Sure. So first of all, let me just clarify that. So there's when you say freelancer license, it's not really right, because freelancer meaning there is no company license, there's just a permit. You have a free zone license and you have a mainland license. I think when they are asking about freelancer, what they mean is they want a freelancer. You get a work permit to work in the UAE, and then under that you can get a visa. Okay, it is very, very limited to only service-based activities. You can't do any physical trading under a freelance permit. Currently, there are 4 free zones in the UAE that are giving it. The main ones is Dubai Media City, or TCOM, I would say. So Media City, Internet City, and Knowledge Village. You have Rakez, and then you have 2454 in Abu Dhabi. Most of the freelance activities are media related. So web designer, wardrobe specialist, animation, things like that. There are certain IT activities as well, and certain training activities like training in communication and development, and training as an education advisor to schools and stuff like that. So as a freelance, you cannot have a company. So if you were going to be working with corporates and stuff like that, there's no company name that you would work under. You would work under, for example, if I got a freelance permit, it would be Sharon Tracy Thomas saying sole permit. And then under that, I would get a visa for myself as a freelancer. And then I would do my work. I would invoice in my personal name. I would not have a corporate bank account. I would get the monies into my personal bank account.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. I think we have seen a few different themes today here that have been recurring: e-commerce, Dubai versus mainland versus free zone setup, but also a lot of questions around property, the property sector as well. And I have another question for you, Paul. That's actually for you, Sharon. No, we already answered that. Don't worry about it. Let's jump on to the next one. Paul, this one is for you. It's from Lily, who is asking, what is the more secure and easier way to source finance for a startup, and why? I know we've talked a little bit about sort of financing earlier with Gary, but do you have anything to add?
No, I think what Gary said, resonates. You for a startup, it's very, very difficult to obtain funding. Typically, you might obtain funding from an investor that you know personally for a startup, or if you have an amazing idea. But it's quite difficult to obtain financing through, a crowdfunding platform, peer-to-peer lending, or even from an angel investor. But angel investor is probably your best route, perhaps through a warm introduction to someone that knows the investor. It's a raw startup that doesn't have any business history. If your business has been operating for 6 months and you can show some sort of turnover, some sort of growth during that period, 6 months to a year, then it's more and more likely that you will obtain investment. But failing that is highly unlikely, I believe, here, unless you have the next big thing in terms of an idea. So I would say set your business up now, get it working, even if it's really, really small numbers, but you can start to see a bit of growth through Q1, Q2, maybe Q3, then you may be able to obtain some funding there. But it is difficult. It's not easy. So I think you might need to self-fund if it's a startup.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Last year we started, I would say the whole sort of food truck industry became really, really popular, and we got tons of inquiries even, throughout the last couple of years. Obviously it's not so much, during COVID, but there's a question here from Madiha who would like to know, what are the requirements for starting a food truck business? Gary, is that something you can elaborate a little bit on?
Yeah, it depends where the food truck is going to be located. If it's Dubai, then what you need to do is you need to set up a restaurant or a catering license first. And then once you have the commercial kitchen and the normal mainland license, you can attach a food truck permit to the license. We have so many inquiries about food trucks because people think, like in other jurisdictions, you can just start with the truck. The truck is your office, the truck is your kitchen, the truck is everything. But unfortunately in the UAE, that's not how it works. At the moment as well, there are too many food trucks in Abu Dhabi, so the activity for food trucks is completely blocked. You'll most likely see food trucks at last exit, but there are just too many applications at the moment in Abu Dhabi, so it's blocked. I do know that there's going to be some new development in Sports City in Dubai where there's going to be quite a lot of food trucks. So if you're going to set something up, then that's something to look into. But you need to have the mainland license first, and then you apply for the food truck permit. It's not the other way around, like it may be in other countries.
All right. So we only have a couple of minutes left. I think time flies. We've gone through lots of really, really good questions today. I just briefly want to return to the whole sort of topic of drop shipping that we discussed earlier. Sharon, someone is asking here, if your business is based in the UAE, can you drop ship to Saudi Arabia, for example, or to another country?
Anywhere. If your business is based here, whether you want to sell in the UAE, you want to sell in Saudi Arabia, you want to sell in the US, you want to sell in the UK, it's fine. UAE does, for the free zone or the mainland, wherever you are set up, they don't mind. However, like in the UAE, for example, if you are making money in the UAE, I either have to be a salaried employee or I have to have a business where I'm making money. Now, for example, if you are selling in Saudi Arabia and you're getting paid in Saudi Arabia might have a rule wherein they say, no, you need to have a company there to sell there. But that is their rules. From the UAE side, there's no issues. You can sell anywhere in the world without a problem.
The beauty of drop shipping is that you take no responsibility for it.
Exactly.
All you're doing is generating a lead. It's almost like a portal. You get a buyer who's interested and you connect them with the seller delivers the product. So you take no responsibility. The only thing that you need to be aware of is you need to look after your reputation, because ultimately if the seller doesn't deliver the product, the client's going to be coming after you and not the seller.
Very true. All right, I think we have time for just one more question, and Gary, I want to direct that to you because I think it's a very good one to finish off on. It's someone is asking that if they set up a free zone company with a 3 visa package, what happens if they need more visas down the line? What do they then need to do?
Depends on the free zone. So some free zones you will have to upgrade and take a physical office. That would apply to most in Dubai, apart from KickLab, which is the one we're running a promotion on in the QE2. In KickLab, you can have up to 5 visas without having a physical office. In DMCC, you can have up to 3 visas without having a physical office. In DWTC, you can have up to 2 visas without having a physical office. So in Dubai, generally that amount of visas needs an office, a physical office inside the free zone. That's how you get the visa quota. For out with Dubai, Fujairah Creative City is probably the most flexible in terms of visas. In Fujairah, you can have a 2 visa package, a 4 visa package, a 6 visa package, a 15 visa package, and in exceptional circumstances, you can have more than 15 visas on one license. So if you start with 2 or 3 visas and you think you're going to need 10, then it might be worth starting out with 15 visa eligibility at the beginning, because normally it costs you more to switch from one to the other than it does if you prepare from it at the beginning.
All right. So with those words, I would like to thank everyone for joining the Virtuzone Academy Q&A webinar today. It's the last one of the year. We'll continue this webinar series into the new year. We've seen a tremendous appetite for discussing all the questions that people they have around setting up businesses in the UAE. So please do continue to follow us on social media and visit our website regularly to stay updated on the upcoming webinars. You can also, on our website, you can also see our two current promotions, which I mentioned earlier, the VC startup package and the company setup package we have for the QE2. So please go on to vset.ae to learn more about those two promotions. We have also recorded this entire webinar, and it will be available on YouTube shortly. So go and subscribe to Virtuzone on YouTube to watch the replay. If you would like to speak to either Paul, Gary, or Sharon about starting your business or whatever questions you have around company information, please reach out to us on info@vc.ae, and we'll be happy to take that conversation forward directly with you. Paul, Gary, and Sharon, thanks so much for being our excellent panel of experts today. Look forward to having you back on some of the upcoming webinars. But thanks so much for your time, everyone, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.